Let's turn to Ephesians chapter 6. We're going to read verses 1 through 4 for our lesson text. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Paul says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. And you fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." By way of introduction, let me start by saying that faith can come two ways. It can come by being instilled, or it can come by being borrowed. When we say it's instilled in someone, that means that it's embraced. That means that they take it to be their own and they apply it in such a way that it belongs to them. It is a part of their mindset, a part of their being. It is a habit that they themselves embrace and encourage. When it's borrowed, then it's never our own. We never treat things that are borrowed the same way we do something that belongs to ourselves. It's just simply a fact of the matter. So when faith is borrowed, it's never fully embraced. And so if it's never fully embraced, it's never developed. We don't allow it to grow because after all, that belongs to somebody else. And I'm just kind of holding on to it for just a little while. It is our responsibility. Not just a responsibility, but it's a blessing that we have, that we can be able to pass our faith on to our children. And if we think about passing it along, we can think about it kind of like passing along a baton. If we're in a race, a relay race, where we're running. I ran a little track, believe it or not, in school and was actually fairly fast. Didn't like it, so I didn't do it for very long. But I remember running a relay. And as vital as running your lap around, your quarter around, or whatever it was, as anything else was when you handed the baton off to the next individual. It required both of you to put forth a certain amount of effort. It was the responsibility of the second runner to reach out and grasp it, but he couldn't do so if I didn't pass it to him in such a way that it could be handled and could be carried. So I want you to think about your faith. Think about the faith that you have and the fact that we are all in one accord running a race in life, because life is a race. And we are all running in one accord a race, and I'm going to finish my journey most likely. My race will be done before many of you will finish your race. But it's a continual race. But in my race, it's essential that I reach out as we are running this race together, and I pass along to you the baton. The many years of my experience, the many years of my confidence that I've had in the gospel, the many years of the application that I should be making in my life to run the race as it should be run, I'm running it, but at the same time, I'm reaching out to you. And I'm handing you this baton. And now, all of a sudden, while we're passing it off, we're both running together. But soon, I'm going to drop back. I'm going to disappear. And you're going to pick up where I left off. That's what we're talking about. What we don't want to see happen during the course of this race is that I'm going to hand it off to you, but I'm going to do such a poor job that you're never able to embrace the baton. And so somewhere along the way, you're going to drop it and you're not going to pass it along to that next person, which most likely will begin with your own family and your own children and your own children's children, who are also running a race. We're either running a race that's with God or we're running a race away from God. The only ones who are running the race with God are those who have embraced as their own this baton of faith that we're talking about. But the handoff is crucial because that baton can be dropped and we are passing through with a twofold in this life responsibility. I have a responsibility to carry that baton, and I have a responsibility to pass that baton on to you. And as I'm handing and you are reaching, we both must make sure that we are secure. Encourage one another to provide that security so that it can be grasped and carried to the next runner. Hope that makes sense. When we don't make an effective connection, we can lose souls, and more importantly, we can lose our own children to the world. Now, just because they don't take it doesn't mean I didn't hand it off. Sometimes people just simply drop it because they drop it. But I want to make sure that everything I do makes them secure. Desire. They have to have the desire. They have to have the desire to make this faith that is mine their own. But I have a great opportunity. I have a wonderful chance to present that faith in such a way that it instills in them the desire to make it their own. Children are a blessing from God. And they are a blessing for which we are responsible. David said in Psalms 127 verses 3 through 5, "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As the arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate." He's talking about passing along to our children this heritage of faith so that when the time comes that they must do battle, and the battle's always being done, it's always constant. So when they themselves reach a point where they engage in that same battle, they'll have the things necessary for them to be able to defend the faith to those that oppose and to stand strong and have a firm conviction about the faith that they themselves have now embraced. It's not borrowed. It's mine. I claim it. It kind of reminds me in that respect of many years ago. One of the Wallace boys, now G.K. Wallace, was speaking at a lectureship somewhere. And they had all those young preachers there. And when Brother Wallace got through speaking, one of those young men came up to him and said, "Brother Wallace." He said, "Yes." He said, "That was Brother Hardman's sermon. I heard him preach that last fall at such and such a place." He said, "Oh, no, I assure you it was mine." He said, "No, sir, I heard him preach it." He said, "No, it's mine. I gave him $2 for it. It belongs to me." Our faith is alike. It's a like precious faith we have in common, but it's our own. We have to reach out and claim it as our own, but we have to teach our children so that they themselves embraced it as their own. We're going to hand it across. We're going to pass it down. I had the neatest thing happen to me about 3 or 4 months ago. I've had this happen twice in my life. It must be something about me. Either I look very poor, people are really, really impressed. I was at the donut place down here getting some donuts, and when the lady brought, she knew what I ordered because I'm that guy that's a creature of habit. She already knew what I wanted. She walked to the window with it, and I reached to pay her, and she said, no, that gentleman that just went out the door took care of that for you. I didn't know that man from Adam. So I did the right thing. I looked around to see if I could find him so I could make sure I was there when he came again, so he might do that twice. No. What I did was, when I had the opportunity, I saw somebody standing in there, and I made sure what they were getting so it wasn't $100 worth of donuts, and I did the same. I had that happen to me at a McDonald's in Pineville, Louisiana one time. The lady ahead of me paid, and she didn't know what I was ordering, but she paid for my order as well. Same thing. We pass along. What's been instilled to us, we pass along to others. But we have to remember how vital it is, and there are three vital things that I believe, there could be a list this long, but three vital things I believe that we must give our children. Number one is, we must give them a positive example. A positive example. We're giving them an example. We're giving them a pattern, but is it positive or is it something that's negative? Is it something that's going to build them up or is it something that's going to tear them down? Is it something that's going to instill them in them a desire to be like us and in being like us, be like Christ? Or is it an example or a pattern that's going to instill in them to be like us and be like the world? We have to make our minds up. Because there's only two things that we're living for. There's either the kingdom of God or there's the kingdom of Satan. There's only two things that we can belong to. We either belong to God or we belong to the world. If we belong to God, heaven is our home. If we belong to the world, we belong to Satan, and hell will be our home. What are we giving them? What kind of influence are we setting for them? Experience is a great teacher. We learn things for ourselves, but there is something to be said for us to understand the value of learning by observation, by what we see. I can honestly say in my life, the truth is, in regular life and in my spiritual well-being, I've learned as much from those who did it wrong as I ever did from those who did it right. In fact, I've found in life, since many are called and few are chosen, that means that few embrace the gospel. I found that there are more examples that are wrong than there are that are right. Take a look and see the kind of lives and what their lifestyle is like and what their life turns out to be when they follow nothing but the world. It's not the real and true story of success, because happiness is never found when the world is the only thing that we embrace as our own. If our only faith is faith in the world, happiness will never be a part of our lives, because we'll never have that peace that passes all understanding. We have to impart to our children the kind of faith in God that the Bible teaches that we ourselves observe. And it's of no value if we don't observe it. Jesus said, let your light, that'd be my light, that'd be your light. He says, let your light, your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Nowhere is it more important, more valuable that our light shine than in our own homes. Let's turn for just a minute to Philippians chapter 2. Now let's read together through verse 16, beginning in verse 12. Philippians 2 and verse 12. Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Notice why. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. If we work out our own salvation, we're going to do of his good pleasure. In other words, we're going to set the right pattern, the right example. Verse 14. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. In other words, be happy in what we're doing. Be glad that you may be, verse 15, blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. Paul's saying something almost exactly what Jesus said. He's saying, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Christ working in me is a visible thing. But what we have to remember is Christ not working in me is also a visible thing. So it is essential that His working in me is seen by everyone, but it is even more essential that His working in me is seen by those who see me the most and know me the best. We really cannot be on our least best behavior around our families and be on our best behavior when we're around somebody else. We really cannot afford to be the least Christian we can be when we're around those we love, and be the best Christian we can be when we're around those that we love, but we just simply know. It is critical that you and I continue to live the very best life that we can live, that we let our light shine around those that are closest to us, because they're watching us the most. They're seeing us the most. Our example is every day set before them without exception. Our husbands, our wives, our sons, our daughters, our family unit as a whole. They are seeing us day in and day out. What do they see in me? What do they hear in me? How do I conduct myself? How do I present myself in such a way as to produce faith in them? Let's turn to 1 Timothy chapter 4. And let's go all the way down to verse 6. And let's read through verse 13. If thou put the brethren in remembrance of these things, thou shalt be a good minister of Jesus Christ, nourished up in the words of faith and of good doctrine, whereunto thou hast attained. But refuse profane and old wives' fables, and exercise thyself rather unto godliness, for bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is and of that which is to come. This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptation. For therefore we both labor and suffer reproach, because we trust in the living God, who is the Savior of all men, especially of those that believe. These things command and teach. Now, listen to the next verse. Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believer in words, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. Till I come, give attendance to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Paul's talking to Timothy about how he's going to live. The pattern that he's going to set, the example that others are going to see in him. Do we not have a responsibility? If we're going to reach out to others to live our lives in such a way that we set the proper example. And can we not see that according to what Paul said here, talking about his example, his purity, his spirit, his charity, his conversation, can we not see that youth can be wasted? Think about it. The value that youth has can be squandered. The value of our youth, they're our greatest asset. And the greatest part of that asset is that they are souls, and those same souls also belong to God, and they're God's greatest asset. The future of the kingdom of God, the future of the church, is dependent upon the young, not upon the old. It's up to the old to ensure that future by us being willing to set the right example. But it's going to be this next generation that's going to carry the church into the next portion of time, not me. 30 years from now, I'll be long gone. 30 years from now, some of you will be long gone, but some of these very folks sitting here right now, the youth, are the greatest asset we have to make certain that God's kingdom continues to prosper and do well. Time, we got to make use of it because it's short. We count the days because time escapes quickly. And an asset must be seized while the opportunity is present. And I promise you, the direction that our children are going to take in their future, the directions of their life, those things are being established while they are young. And there's no better place for a good example than in our own homes. That's the best place in the world to start because that's where you have the greatest power to be an influence for good. We have the greatest amount of influence on our children. Those are the human beings that we have the opportunity to do the very greatest amount of work that can be done. And we do understand that because we establish patterns for their future. We instill in them the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But lo and behold, oftentimes we forget that there's a 4th R that is way more important than reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that is the word righteousness. We want to instill in them those values of righteousness. And we do that beginning with me. I'm going to set the proper example. Because if I don't set the proper example, everything else I say amounts to zero, zilch. Because if I'm not consistent with what I say by what I do, no one's going to take what I say seriously. So we start with ourselves. And the pattern that I'm living, the example that I'm going to set, and then we give them, along with that, part 2. And that is diligent instruction. Because it is an absolute certainty without proper guidance, they'll fail. The wise man Solomon said in Proverbs 22 and verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's not necessarily talking about righteousness, but righteousness is included. He's talking about taking a child and understanding them. See what direction, what kind of discipline, what kind of correction, what kind of instruction is necessary for them. We need to set the right example, but example by itself will not produce faith. There has to be instruction. And according to our lesson text that we started out with in Ephesians chapter 6, in verse 4, fathers take a leading role in providing this instruction. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Who did he say that to? Let's think about that again. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Fathers matter. In fact, Abraham was chosen for this very reason himself. Genesis 18 and verse 19, God said about Abraham, for I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. I know him. Abraham was a man who was able to lead his family, his household. Michael's got a lectureship coming up. He's going to speak on Isaac. And me and him were talking about Isaac the other day. Isaac was a child of promise. And Abraham took great pride in the fact that he finally received his son. But then God called upon Abraham to offer up Isaac in sacrifice. And he led him to the place of the sacrifice that would have been Mount Moriah, which, by the way, is Calvary, where Jesus was sacrificed. And Isaac asked his father, where is the lamb or the ram for sacrifice? And Abraham told his son said, God will provide. And he took him up and he bound him and was going to kill him. And I read somewhere, Michael had read somewhere, somebody said, well, you know, Abraham took Isaac, and Isaac was of his age, so Isaac had to give in. I don't know whether he did or whether he didn't. No need to speculating on that. Michael made comment the other day, said, well, I wonder why he bound him. I said, well, you wouldn't want him kicking and thrashing while he was cutting his throat. Because that's exactly what he was going to do. But Abraham's influence on Isaac was so great that even after Isaac was about to be offered and God stopped that from taking place, Isaac still embraced the faith that Abraham imparted to him. And of all the Old Testament characters, the one thing that Isaac is known the most for is for his obedient faith and his trust in God. Where did that come from? It came from a father, Abraham, who instilled in him that faith that Isaac embraced even after Abraham took him to Mount Moriah, bound him, and was going to put him to death. That speaks well of Isaac. I asked Michael, I said, son, if I took you somewhere to a mountain, tied you up, pulled a knife, and started looking up into the heavens, and all of a sudden I changed my mind, would you go off me any more mountain climbing? He said, don't think so, Daddy. Joshua was God's great leader. Joshua was growing old in Joshua chapter 24, and he gathered the elders and the children of Israel together. And in verse 15 he said, and if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And they said, we'll choose God. And they stayed faithful for about a generation. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9, the record says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thine soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up, and thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy head, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. These are not simply words of advice, but this is divine instruction by way of command from God as to what will make this work. Now we know what will make it work. And anything but that, everything else will not make it work. Pretty simple, huh? Divine instruction. This will make it work, and failure can possibly cost them their soul, and failure can possibly even cost us our soul, and even if it doesn't cost our soul, it will surely sacrifice our happiness if we don't impart this faith to those that we love. It'll cost us our future peace of mind and our personal success. Even if I make it to heaven, during the course of my life will be filled with the failures and regrets that accompany those who do not make the energy and effort be put forward. How do we best teach our children? Well, give them what you have. What do you have? Well, give them everything God has given you. He blessed those efforts. Give them what He's given you. Read the Bible together. Pray together. Discuss your faith together. Discuss what Bible faith is together. Romans 10 and verse 17. So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. Express or present your faith with conviction. Act like you believe it. If you don't act like you believe it, they're not going to believe it. I've been in sales all of my life. I'll be 70 years old pretty soon. All I've ever done is sell things. But I have never been able to sell a single product that I did not have any confidence in. And I refuse to sell something that I didn't believe in. And still won't do that today. If I don't have confidence in it, I can't sell it. We're not selling faith, but we're presenting it. By our example, by how we live, by what we expect out of our families and our lives. And if we're not doing that, we don't believe it. And if we don't believe it, they're not going to believe it because there is no conviction on our part. There will be no conviction on their part. And when we present all these things, we demand observance. Somebody says, I'm not going to force that on my kids. You force them to brush their teeth. You force them to take a bath. You force them to brush their hair. You force them to dress like somebody. My mama said the greatest fear she had when I started school was because until I was in school, no matter how she dressed me, it wouldn't be 15 minutes she'd look outside and I was standing there in a long sleeve shirt, my underwear, and a pair of shoes. And she was scared to death I was going to take my pants off first thing when I got to school. I guess I never did. We demand that they do certain things. We expect them to do their schoolwork, but we don't expect them to observe patterns of righteousness. Maybe the reason that we don't expect them to observe those patterns of righteousness is that in reality, while we put on a great front, we're out in public and people see us in worship, or people see us at different events that have to do with the church. We put on a good pattern there, but we're not doing that at home. And so, since we're not doing it at home, we have no expectations of them doing it at home. We've got to show the pattern of these convictions. And very vital. And I want you to get this, because I have looked around our world for the last generation and I see this being a real problem. And I believe it's one of our greatest problems. Last and most important, none of this will work until we pay attention. I'm talking about we pay attention. Pay attention to what's taking place with your children. Pay attention to what time they're spending on the phone. Pay attention to what time they're spending on the internet. Pay attention to what time they're spending in front of the TV. Pay attention to what kind and how much time they're spending with certain friends. And pay attention to the fact that sometimes there are obvious changes taking place in their behavior that everybody else can see, but you're so busy with whatever, you have no clue. And they're your responsibility. If you're going to help them get to heaven, you've got to know what's going on in their activities, in their thoughts, in their actions. You've got to know what's going on when they're in that room by themselves, with that little computer that we call a telephone that has a whole lot more information and is easier to obtain than any laptop I've ever had. You can pull up anything in the world on a cell phone if you've got one bar. Thank you so much. When you can't even get a laptop to work when it's hooked up on the best internet connection in the world, Casey. That phone's an amazing little instrument for good, and it's an amazing little instrument for all kinds of evil things. Pay attention to who their friends are. I promise you, if their friends are sorry and they're up to no good, your child is going to be just like I was and just like you were when you were a kid. We're going to follow after them. They're not going to follow after us. We're not going to change their outlook. They're going to change ours. There might be an exception to that rule, but I doubt it. And the sad thing is because we don't get this because we don't pay attention. We don't see this because we don't pay attention. We've got to know and we've got to understand our own children. Because I'm sorry, your little Johnny might do this. And yes, your little Sally might be doing this. And when somebody comes to you and you say, oh, I had no idea. Everybody else knew. Why didn't you know? It's your child. Why wouldn't you know? You need to know them and understand them better than anybody else. When I was a kid, every night at 10 o'clock, before the Indian came on, how many of y'all remember the Indian? And that's what you woke up to the next morning. At 10 o'clock, when the news came on, Channel 8, they always said exactly the same thing. Parents, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Listen to me. In this world we live in, it's 10 o'clock, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Do you know where your children are? Because it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where they are? Do you understand what's going on with them? Get your head out of the sand and start looking. Pay attention. Because we've got to give them consistent, loving discipline. We can't cast them as seed across an open field, because there all that'll happen is the fowls of the air will gather them up. They'll be consumed. That would be the world. That was Israel's consistent folly that caused them to fall over and over and over again, was their children. One of my favorite verses is found in Hosea chapter 8, two verses, verses 7 and 8, talking about Israel. He said, for they have sown the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind. It hath no stalk, the bud shall yield no meal. If so be it yield, the strangers will swallow it up. Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. That summed up the history of that nation. Oh, we build our lives. We pursue our careers. We pursue our pleasures. We take more vacations in this day and time than I ever imagined. When I was a kid, we took vacations maybe once every 2 or 3 years. Maybe, Terry, maybe. And that then was sitting in the back window of a 1961 Galaxy going down the road with the sun shining on you, took 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get to Bossier. That was a big trip. We went to stay with my uncle and them on Pecan Street all day and come in way after dark. What an adventure. Laying in that car window the whole time, like a dog watching cars go by. We surround ourselves with our careers and our pleasures for ourselves, and in our foolishness of pursuit, we lose the greatest treasure that we'll ever have, our heritage, our children. The thing which really matters most. Because the fact is, there are things which really matter, and there are things which really don't matter. We got to decide. And children, they need to obey. And we need to make them obey. They're our children. I hear people say, I can't make them mine, buddy. I could. They might not like it, but I did. I didn't like it, but my mom and daddy did. It's a simple matter of making you mine. I can't make you appreciate it. I can't make you enjoy it, but I can make you act like you're going to mind, and you're going to mind while I'm looking at you. We have that control. Lady told me one time whose daughter, they were worshiping here, whose daughter got to where she was wearing less to church than most folks wore to bed. And I had to get up and address it. I didn't call her by name, but I preached a sermon on modest behavior, modest apparel and immodest apparel. And she came out and she said, Brother Freddie, were you talking about me? I said, no, ma'am. She said, were you talking about, and she named her daughter by name, and I said, yes, ma'am. And the kid was on up in years. She was nearly 17 years old. She said, I don't know what to do. Said, I just don't know what to do. I don't feel like I have control. She's almost 17 years old. I said, she lives in your house. Well, yes, sir, you know she does. I said, you got all the control in the world. I don't know what the problem is. I said, I do. Your daughter doesn't understand the difference in underwear and outerwear. And I said, but you can fix that. You know what? She did. She went home, put her foot down, and she did. It's not like your hair. I've been in situations where I couldn't do anything with my hair. I've been sleeping on it all night, or I've had a hat on all day. You just do the best. We're not talking about hair. We're talking about human beings. And we're talking about discipline. We set the standard and we demand. God demands. Does God demand? Yes, God demands. Everything God says is a command. You know what that means? That's a demand. God demands that we observe His rules. We set the standard. We set the rules and we demand that they learn to follow our rules. And our rules just simply need to be in harmony with our own pattern as we follow the rules, the demands that God puts upon us. Knowing, as the Hebrew writer said in Hebrews 12 verse 6, for whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth. And He scourgeth every son whom He receiveth. Think about that. Our children are tender plants. And they need care, and they need cultivation so that they might grow. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. If you'd have a need in any way this morning to respond to the invitation, you simply come now while together we're standing, we sing for your encouragement.